And I don't mind telling you, I was wearing these $600 custom-made leather shoes and this $13,000 Rolex when it happened. That's why I'm Ric Flair.
Welcome to another edition of Wrestling Real Talk with Rudy and A.T. Huck. Today, our subject is the 16-time World's Champion, a man who's done it all in the wrestling business, a man who has survived plane crashes, lightning strikes, all kinds of car crashes. My God, of course, I must be talking about the Nature Boy, Ric Flair.
Oh my God, Ric Flair is without a doubt, in my opinion, Rudy, the best wrestler in the history of professional wrestling.
Now, when you say wrestler, okay, let's break it down.
Mm-hmm.
Most would say Lou Thesz was the best wrestler.
When I say wrestler, of course, I'm talking about professional wrestling. The entire spectrum, everything that comprises being a pro wrestler. That means verbal skills, ring skills, the entertainment, the drawing factor. Those are the things that Ric Flair did.
When you talk of world champions, when you talk of those guys with honor, and Ric Flair, no doubt about it, has respect and honor in the wrestling business.
Yeah.
But in comparison to, let's say, the Sheik, who in my eyes is probably the greatest wrestler ever to live.
Well, you know how I feel about the Sheik. If
Yes.
it wasn't for the original Sheik, there would be no A.T. Huck. There would be
Rude
no
Boy?
Rude Boy. There would be no Sweet Daddy Malcolm Monroe. There would be no Jake the Snake Roberts. There would be no Macho Man Randy Savage.
Greg Valentine.
Greg Valentine. A lot of people came up under the Sheik's wing, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
You know, because of big time wrestling. So yeah, the original Sheik had a huge impact on professional wrestling. And here in Michigan, we talk about the Sheik.
Yes.
Worldwide, they talk about Ric Flair.
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo, right here.
Sheik was still a monster in Japan, even
He
to
was.
the time of his death.
Yeah, that he was. Ric Flair, still, and I love the Sheik.
Oh, I know
mean,
you
I
do.
have this scar on my forehead from the Sheik.
Yes.
I started watching wrestling in maybe 1968. You know, I was very young, maybe 7 years old, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And grew up with the Sheik. That's
Yeah.
why I watched wrestling. But still, Ric Flair, when I saw Ric Flair, when I went to Atlanta in 1980, I could see the Omni from my dorm room. You know, that's how close I was to Georgia
What was your
Championship
college?
Wrestling. Morris Brown in Atlanta. I watched TBS 605.
Yes.
You know, every Saturday. I didn't
Yes.
care if a girl was coming over or whatever. She had to watch wrestling, you know? And Ric Flair wasn't the main wrestler at Georgia Championship Wrestling, but that's where I first got to see him. Like I said, he influenced and made so many wrestlers throughout his career. You know, Sting, Lex Luger, Nikita Koloff. You know, and you might want to argue that there were some other wrestlers involved in making those wrestlers.
Sure.
But Ric Flair put those guys on the map. He taught them how to work
Okay.
in the ring.
Even when you talk of other world's champions throughout history,
Yeah.
what's the comparison to Ric Flair, would say Nick Bockwinkel?
Well, Nick Bockwinkel,
Who, by the way, had everything you said. He had the charisma, he had the talking power, he could work.
well, I still go back to what I said a few seconds ago. Nobody talks about Nick Bockwinkel on the level that they talk about Ric Flair. If you go to basketball games, football games, what are they talking about? They're talking about alligators on their feet, Rolex watches, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing, son of a gun.
Flying on the water like a kid.
Hey, this is for all my kiss stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine ride, jet flying, dripping, son of a gun.
Was there ever a World's Champion versus World's Champion Flair against Nick Bockwinkel? I don't know if it's ever happened. I heard something maybe happened in Winnipeg.
And maybe in Japan,
Okay.
that possibility. I don't want to say definitively yes.
Right.
But I know they did have matches together. The Sheik personally told me that he never worked Ric Flair. You know, we went out to dinner, and we were talking, and I asked him, you know, and he said, no, he never worked Ric Flair.
What about Ric Flair, his career against a Terry Funk, who is also a guy who was world's champion, again, who can cut a promo and damn it, can go in the ring.
Liar! You are a liar! I came here for a purpose.
Love Terry Funk. You know I do.
I do.
You know, his feud with Ric Flair was much later in Terry Funk's career.
Yeah.
You know, the match they had in, was it Memphis or Nashville? I forget exactly, in Tennessee.
Yeah.
You know, where Terry Funk pile drove him through the
Through
table.
the table, yeah.
You know, that was all great.
Yeah.
That was all great. But once again, Terry Funk is on my Mount Rushmore, my uncompleted Mount Rushmore. You know, I don't think I have enough room on the mountain for some of my favorite wrestlers.
Right.
But I would still have to say Ric Flair over Terry Funk as a total package for professional wrestling as a whole.
Okay.
A lot of people hold Terry Funk very high, and I do too.
Yeah.
But I still have to say Ric Flair. I can't say that Terry Funk made the wrestlers that Ric Flair made. You know, Sabu, Cactus Jack, you know.
He made a
R2.
whole, he made ECW,
He did. ECW, you know, was great. You know, I was in ECW.
You were an alumni,
You know,
yes.
ECW lasted about 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, or so.
By the way, changed the game of wrestling forever.
It did. It
forever.
did. It did. It changed professional wrestling as far as that hardcore aspect. Ric Flair, to me, and I keep going back to that, he's probably one of the most imitated wrestlers in the world.
Yeah.
Still to this day,
Yeah.
people imitate Ric Flair. And that's one thing I tell a lot of wrestlers now when I talk to them. I said, you need to be imitatable.
Okay.
You know, if you have people imitating you and dressing like you know you got something.
Yeah.
And Ric Flair had that, you know, and he still has that today.
He does. He's still very active. I mean, everyone's talking about him today in this day and age. And a man who is, like I said at the top of the program, who has been involved in plane crashes and lightning strike. The guy was struck by lightning.
He had to recreate himself. You know, he started out wanting to imitate Dusty Rhodes. Rambling Ricky Rhodes. You know, his hair was short. Ric Flair was kind of chunky.
Yeah, he was real
chunky.
Yeah.
You know, you've seen the picture. He started out in the AWA, trained by Vern Gagne. And Dusty, from what I read, said that, you know, be your own man, baby. You know, don't imitate Dusty. You know, be your own man.
Yeah. What about a guy like Jerry Lawler, who Jerry Lawler, I mean, owned not just Memphis, by the way. Jerry Lawler was a guy who really wasn't on he wasn't in the big federations, WCW, WWE, or WWF at the time, but still, everyone knew Jerry Lawler. What do you compare a Jerry Lawler to a Ric Flair? Because, by the way, Jerry Lawler made a lot of guys.
He did, but I still have to put Ric Flair over Jerry Lawler, you know? They didn't bring Jerry Lawler in to work Ric Flair. Jerry Lawler brought Ric Flair in to work Jerry Lawler.
Right.
You know? And the two of them together, I think they may have only had one, you know, big match there in Memphis.
Yeah.
You know, but he brought Ric Flair in because Ric Flair was the world champion.
Right.
You know, it wasn't Jerry Lawler traveling all over wrestling Ric Flair.
Right.
Ric Flair was going to Memphis. He was going to Portland. He was going to Florida. He was going to Texas. He was going to Japan. He was going to the Carolinas. Ric Flair was going to Puerto Rico, defending that world title.
You mentioned Puerto Rico.
Go ahead.
You mentioned Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know this. Ric Flair actually lost the World's Championship to Carlos Colon. Now, it wasn't in Puerto Rico, it was in Trinidad.
In Trinidad. That was Carlos Colon?
Yes.
I thought it was another wrestler that he lost the world title to as well. Down there in the island somewhere. Was it Tyree Pride?
Yes.
Yeah, I meant to look that up.
Right, you're right about that.
Yeah.
And history doesn't really tell that
They
very
don't tell
often.
that story. Yeah.
But your thoughts on Carlos Colon?
I like Carlos Colon. Carlos Colon to me was like the Sheik was here in Michigan, how Jerry Lawler was in Tennessee. You know, he was the man in Puerto Rico.
Right.
You know, he was the man in Puerto Rico. Everybody came in, wrestled Carlos Colon.
Yes, sir.
You know, Ric Flair went to Puerto Rico and wrestled Carlos Colon.
Yes, sir.
However, Carlos Colon did not wrestle Ric Flair all over the country.
Fair enough.
They brought Ric Flair in to wrestle Carlos Colon.
Fair enough. What's that one dream match that you never got to see with Ric Flair that you sure would love to? Either a passed on wrestler or someone even today.
I'm gonna have to say, and I thought about this a few times, I've seen Ric Flair work just about everybody. But one person that he never worked that I know of was Bruno Sammartino.
Oh, whoa.
I think both in their primes, that would have been a money match.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
You know, not just one match, but a good program between the two.
A nice program.
Yeah.
So again, like you said, Flair went everywhere. He went everywhere. He wrestled everyone. One of the standout spots for me growing up was when he went to Texas.
Yes.
And he wrestled Kerry
Von Erich.
and he lost the World's Championship right there in Dallas.
Originally that was supposed to be David.
Right.
You know,
right.
but David, tragically passed away.
Yeah.
And Fritz Von Erich, who was part of the NWA,
Okay, he was on the committee?
Yeah, he was on the committee.
Okay.
Really, petitioned for that title change for Kerry. Was it in Texas Stadium? One of the big stadiums.
Oh, yeah.
And
I think it was the David Memorial Show.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe so. And I was living in Georgia at the time, going to college when that happened.
Yeah.
And man, it was like, wow, Kerry Von Erich, is world champion. Because I saw the Von Erichs, come up from being in Georgia from 1980, and I saw their rise.
Right. Ric Flair, if you had to give him a grade from A to E, A of course being the best, I think I could tell what you're gonna give.
Well, yeah, I give Ric Flair an A.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I look at wrestlers for what I watch on television. I don't care about what they do in their personal lives and that type of thing. Everybody has their demons. Nobody's perfect.
Absolutely.
What we get along. I've never met Ric Flair.
Yeah.
What we get along, I don't know. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I might not like him as a person.
Right.
But I know that he's entertained me as a fan on that television and at those arenas. When I was at the Omni and I saw him work Stan Hansen and Tony Atlas, and several others, I was entertained by those matches.
I got to tell you this. I've met Ric Flair on a few occasions. When I was with the Insane Clown Posse at WCW, we have some great pictures with him together. And of course, we brought him to the Gathering of the Juggalos.
Which I missed those.
Where he did, he actually was the host of the main stage. And it only lasted one guy because someone started throwing crap.
Oh,
and he
got
like,
out of here. Oh.
I'm out. He took his 10 grand and left.
Oh, wow.
But Ric Flair, let me say this, when I met him, he was a great guy. I thought it was really cool. I was afraid to meet him because you know how they always say you don't want to meet your heroes or those ones that you, but he was pretty cool to me,
Cool. Right.
And that brings us to the end of the program here. Any final words on Ric Flair?
Woo!
Woo! You heard it right here. This has been Wrestling Real Talk. He's A.T. Huck. I'm Rude Boy.
Woo!